All right, so welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be taking a closer look here at a case out of Nebraska,
Oh,
a
okay.
car crash that left a young woman with a really life-altering injury. We've got two news articles that we're going to use to try to kind of piece together what happened.
Mm-hmm.
One's from a local news source and the other one's from the Associated Press.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes it's really interesting how different sources,
Yeah.
even when they're talking about the same event,
Right.
really kind of approach it in different ways.
Totally. Yeah, and that's what makes this so interesting to me. So let's just start with the local news article.
Yeah.
And this one really focuses on the human impact of this crash
Yeah.
and tells the story of Evelyn Laux. She's a 17-year-old from Wisconsin, and she was visiting a friend in Nebraska over the holidays.
Oh, wow.
And on January 3rd, 2025, so very recently,
Yeah.
Evelyn was driving a pickup truck when she lost control, and it flipped.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is where the story gets really heartbreaking.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, so the article goes on to detail how she suffered a very serious spinal injury in the crash,
Oh, wow.
leaving her paralyzed.
Oh, my gosh.
And then it describes the emotional toll that this has taken on her and her whole family.
Of course.
You know, trying to paint this picture of their struggle to cope with such a sudden, devastating change.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, that's,
Right.
just your life can change so fast.
Absolutely, yeah, and just a young woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the article also talks about how the whole community is really rallying around Evelyn and her family,
That's good.
offering support,
That's nice.
which is really great to see.
Yeah.
But this is where the second article from the Associated Press kind of adds another layer
Oh,
to this whole story.
okay.
It reveals that the passenger who was in the truck with Evie
Uh-huh.
was her friend,
Okay.
and that friend has been charged in connection with this crash.
So it wasn't just an accident?
Well, that's what makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Because the AP article doesn't go into detail about what the charges are,
Right.
but just the fact that there are charges at all.
Yeah, that raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, it brings up a whole other set of
Yeah,
questions, like,
yeah.
was this something more than just a tragic accident?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, just thinking about, Avi's family, like on top of everything else,
Oh, I know.
this is something else they have to deal with.
Absolutely. And yeah, so, we're left wondering what could lead to these charges.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other factors involved that weren't initially apparent?
Right. Yeah. Maybe there was something that happened before the crash.
Exactly. Yeah. It definitely shifts our whole understanding of this whole situation.
Definitely. It really
Yeah.
makes you think about what else could be going on here.
It does, yeah. And it's interesting how each article is kind of approaching this story from a different angle.
Yeah.
The local news piece is really focusing on like the human element,
Yeah.
the emotional impact that it's had on Evie and her family.
It's very personal, and it really makes you feel for them.
Right. And then the AP one is like, more just the facts.
Yeah.
Here's the legal stuff.
Right. Just straight reporting.
Yeah. And it's almost like reading about two different events.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It highlights how, just the perspective can shape a story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it's good that we have both of these,
Yeah.
because then we can kind of form a more complete picture.
Right. It's like having two pieces of a
Yeah.
puzzle.
Exactly.
And they look different, but you put them
Yeah.
together and you get a better understanding.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes you realize that things are rarely as simple as they seem.
Yeah, definitely. And this case is a really good example of that.
Right. Because we have the initial tragedy of the accident,
Mm-hmm.
the terrible, consequences for every.
Yeah.
And now this whole other layer of, legal stuff.
And the possibility of, like, was there some wrongdoing? Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
And as we're kind of piecing this together, we have to acknowledge, like,
Right.
we don't know everything.
Yeah. There's still a lot of questions.
Right. Like, what were the exact circumstances leading up to the crash?
Right.
What evidence supports the charges?
Exactly. And hopefully those are things that,
Right.
as the legal process goes on, we'll get answers to those questions.
Yeah, exactly. And it just reminds us that,
Yeah.
Every story has multiple sides.
Yeah.
And we have to try to look at all of them.
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to something like this.
Right.
You have to be really careful about,
Not jumping to conclusions.
about, assuming that somebody's guilty
Right.
or anything like that.
Right.
Let the legal process play out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this story brings up some big questions
Definitely.
about, responsibility,
Yeah.
accountability,
Yeah.
and just the complexities of,
Of the justice system.
of the justice system. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it also reminds us that even with something as tragic as this,
Yeah.
we have to try to figure out
Yeah.
what really
What
happened.
truth is.
Yeah. And be fair to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really involved.
Well said. So, as we're looking at these articles,
Mm-hmm.
anything that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the thing that really struck me was just the way the two articles kind of deal with this emotional side of things versus the legal.
Yeah.
It shows how differently people respond to, difficult situations like this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And how those can clash.
Totally. Yeah, and it makes you think about, do we lose sight of that human part of it?
Yeah, especially when the legal system gets involved.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a tough balance.
Yeah.
We need justice.
Yeah.
But we also have to remember
Yeah.
that there are real people involved.
Absolutely. And, cases like this,
Yeah.
they're never easy.
Well,
And there are a lot of different perspectives.
right.
And it's hard to say what the truth is sometimes.
Right. And as we wrap this up,
Yeah.
I'm just left thinking about how this new information with the charges against the friend,
Right.
How does that change how we see this whole story?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if it was just a simple accident or if there was something more going on.
Right.
And I think we need to avoid jumping to conclusions.
Absolutely.
Until all the facts come out.
Let the legal process do what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we wait for more information on this, it's a good reminder that things are rarely black and white.
Yeah.
There's often a lot more to the story
Definitely.
than we see at first.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes you think, doesn't it?
Really does, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like these two articles, they're about the same thing, but they almost feel like two different stories.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think it shows just how powerful perspective can be. The local news, they really wanted us to see how this accident has affected Every and her family.
Yeah.
Emotionally, it's very personal. You really feel for them.
Yeah, you really do.
And then the AP article, they're more focused on okay, so there might be legal trouble here.
Right.
And they're not really talking about the feelings so much. It's more like just the facts.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting to me because I'm like, does one of those perspectives take over the other?
Right. Yeah.
Do we forget about the human side of it once the lawyers get involved?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important to remember both, this was a terrible thing for Every and her family.
Right.
But we also need to figure out what really happened and if someone should be held accountable.
Yeah, that's true. It's a really tough balance.
Yeah.
We want justice, but, we can't forget about the people involved.
Exactly.
So I guess as we kind of finish up here, this whole thing with the charges against the friend, how does that change how we see this?
It definitely adds another layer, right? Maybe it wasn't just an accident. Maybe something else happened.
Yeah.
But I think we got to be careful about saying anything for sure until we know more.
Let the investigation do its thing.
Exactly.
And I guess this whole story, it just really makes you think, life can change so fast.
Oh, for sure.
And sometimes the choices we make, they have big consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something we should all remember.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a lot to process, but really important. And we'll keep following this story as it develops.
Sure.
Thank you for listening to Justice for the Souls.